how are you? Time for another edition of Simply Staying here at the beach in Michigan. I hope you are doing well this morning. We have a number of different issues to cover. I'm still in my Hawaii gear, as you can see today. Um, so I think this morning the big thing is that, there's a very serious chance that President Biden's actually going to pull out of the race in the U.S. And it has to do with the fact that, as I had stated before in previous episodes, we talked about the extenuating issues around his health. There's also the fact that both he and former President Donald Trump have been compromised by what is actually known as the FSB of Russia, but it's the KGB. I, I think both men have enough significant health problems to simply write a lot of this off. But the reality about all of it is I was in DC for 19 years and I spent a huge amount of time going through investigations, and it was incredibly difficult to get around the Chinese assets for the CCP and the Russian assets for the FSB, the old KGB in the area. And then the DC area itself is oftentimes engaged in a lot of what is basically warfare and shares the same existence as Kiev and Ukraine, constantly under attack. I had found out myself over 20 years ago about the issues with the manual of founding Endeavor WME, and also worked for Booz Allen Hamilton with wanting to set the situation with Burisma, the situation with Burisma, if you need trouble understanding that. And I reported it, and the U.S. government just decided to do corruption in that area to just let it go ahead, and that it would just come out later if Biden actually took the payment or not, and he would have to go through processes. Of course, Congress has been working on impeaching him. There's been significant investigations. I don't really know that I would judge either man, having been in the middle of it myself as a witness. As you know, I am also someone who's done some investigative journalism. I have a certification in public relations from the NDA, and was a student at Luther College where Christopher Wray actually attended. By the way, you need to remember the problem with Christopher Wray and the so-called FBI is that it's actually the old KGB, now known as the FSB of Russia, mostly privatized today, lost its status as a true government agency because it took on too many employees from Booz Allen Hamilton, which takes projects primarily from where and from who? The Chinese CCP and the FSB of Russia. Let's also note, importantly, that J.Lo has currently had to cancel her tour. As in recent news, you probably think the most recent news is that she's had to cancel her tour and her movie sucks. The issue is actually that she has been blocked by the U.S. Department of Labor as well as the U.S. military from trafficking people anymore, and has been set up to make really bad projects, which she doesn't care about because she primarily blows everyone else's money. She's blown through mine. She's currently just going around blowing everyone else's money that she can find and get attached to, noting that within the Hollywood industry, there's plenty of people who have money and income. I wouldn't surprise me if she was actually running around Michigan today trying to get a hold of Sandra Bullock's money, since Sandra Bullock supposedly lives in the state. The point is that she's always had a relationship with P. Diddy, who's now in trouble, and she's going to support his legal issues. And you need to remember that the relationship to Ben Affleck is a complete fraud and a lie. There just simply isn't one. That he's somebody who's been put forward by the FSB to be married to her, and the State Department is actually breaking them up. She's actually been thrown out of the house that she's been squatting in Los Angeles. She's always been happy to sell your kid, your car, your house, steal your things, your money. If she could bottle up your soul and sell it, she would. That's how disgusting she is. I actually had to work for her when I was at Luther College, and I ended up just using it all to turn everything in as a part of the legal processes I went through to get away from these stupid groups and dumb traffickers. It's also important to remember what I taught you about religious groups in the U.S. through the Thought Project, just so you know, which is that I went through every Christian denomination I could find, and they all had problems with some of them being front groups, especially the PCUSA was a really bad fake front group based off the old Presbyterian church that worked for the Russian government, called the FSB, sends radio signals for them, believes in human sacrifice and abuse and stealing people's money. Remember also that I couldn't find a denomination where some of these Nazi behaviors weren't practiced, that there was always cult practices involved in all of it, and that even the Jewish groups I went to said that they had sects that were cannibals, believed in human sacrifice and trafficking people, and that there was always a common issue, even in the Muslim groups as well. And remember that the old cult of ISIS still exists, which was actually a cult that believed in human sacrifice and trafficking and blood drinking, all practices which are also been traced to the old czars of Russia, still practiced by the FSB of Russia, or you could simply say they just seem to be too much like the old Aztecs or Mayans. Noting all of this, going back to Christopher Wray, He was actually a kid growing up in Dubuque, and his parents had said they thought he wanted to be a fireman. It would have been much better if he'd simply been a guy who worked at the local fire department. Instead, they purchased a position for him at the FBI through Booz Allen Hamilton, not even realizing that the U.S. government had already decided it was basically a junk agency they were going to get rid of. And unfortunately, it turned out, I realized during the investigations, to not be the kid who really admired firefighters to solve crimes, but to actually be the literal equivalent of the fireman who wanted to start the fires himself. Because that's what the movie Backtrack was about. And it's kind of important to remember that he spent a huge amount of time during the years that I was at DC area and also at Luther College doing what he called Thai MI6 setups, which is essentially demanding that women hang out with him provided with hand jobs, and then he would take it down from his pants and sit there and make stupid pig noises and call it a Thai investigation. That is not a Thai MI6 investigation. He is actually someone who is so stupid that he has managed to tick off the Thai government and MI6. That when he tried to make a trip over to England to pretend like he wanted to be like MI5, they decided he was a moronic idiot. Keep it all in mind. Also remember that Condoleezza Rice was a part of the PCUSA and also had Buffalo Bill working for her and severely undermined the U.S. government, and that people were so scared of her during the years I lived in the D.C. area that they put together a huge number of steps to try to protect everyone else, because she really had been at the NSA and really had been at the State Department and really had undermined those organizations. It's also important to remember that she's had a relationship with Booz Allen Hamilton herself, which is an organization that the U.S. government is still trying to actually get rid of and remove from the U.S. I've got a few names to release here because I'm just kind of fed up. As far as I know, the man that I referred to as a counterterrorism agent also went by the nickname Famous James Luther College, married a woman named Colleen Bubb, who also went by the alias Jen Cave. Jen Cave being the lobbyist who advocates for slavery and openly killing people and human sacrifice, also works in the West Wing under George W. Bush. She also was really crazy about Freddie Lyons, so I'm sure she's fairly depressed these days. He's in federal prison, but that's where he's going to go, and that's where he's going to stay, and that's where he is. So, as far as the go, I mean, he already went, but you know what I mean. I need to give you another name as well. You're probably wondering what the alias to that J.Lo used to go by, noting that she was someone who never slept in a white bedroom, as her press releases claim, but always slept in a makeup-filled, disgusting, dirty bed. Never properly washed herself and was crazy and would run around and get in fights with people and masturbate in public at Luther College. I have to note that she had a relationship to Sir Stan Wilhelm. People nicknamed that and slept with both of them. And it's also important to remember that she actually went by the name Blanca Krishak, Krysdak. That was one of her aliases. She is a 5'3" woman, a very strong runner, not a good dancer, can't sing, always used other people's voices, used my voice, can't dance, and has forced other people to dance at her place. Used choreographed for me, never paid for it. And I don't even trust any of these other women that have claimed that they worked for her, because too many of them have seemed to have gotten paid to some degree, and I never did. And they also all keep coming out through outlets that are darkly tied back to the old KGB, FSB of Russia. Moving on. It's important to note that she's also borderline and extremely dangerous. So if you do come into contact with her, remember that she's wearing a masking. I was one of the people who was forced to make a mask for her back in the 2000s, early 2000s. So she's worn a prosthetic fake face of mine for years. I think it may have been taken away finally, but she's had several of them made. She's a rapist, and she's actually wanted for armed robbery, theft, murder, perjury, larceny. I'm sure you could find a number of different things to charge her on as far as financial issues as well. Why the IRS hasn't gone after her more is probably because she's not an actual U.S. citizen, and she really was one of the weird, dumb submarine kids that came in through the Mississippi back in the 1980s in the U.S., thanks to the mistakes or flaws or even the relationship to the KGB himself of H.W. Bush, former vice president. Moving on, it's so important to know that both Iowa failed to arrest her, New York and California so far. So I don't know what state's going to finally get her put away, but you need to remember that she actually has blue eyes, that she may even appear as a 5'3" woman with medium toned skin, blue eyes, and gray hair for all you know. That she is on the move these days and trying to cancel a lot of her appearances to try to go out and get more people trafficked back into working for her. By the way, just for the record for everybody, I don't do anything for other artists anymore, and I don't create anything for them as far as I'm concerned. If anyone wanted to hire me, they would have to go through Patreon. And they would actually have to pay all the money up front. And so these people are all cheap and just labor traffic everybody, they're not going to do that. So that settles that. Moving on, it's kind of important to remember that Buffalo Bill is still free, and he's a fairly dangerous person who has trafficked people for both Taylor Swift Beyonce, Joe Rogan. You know, there's no reason to hide the truth anymore about Endeavor WME being just this disgusting fake company, at least in part that was founded originally here in the US. And as far as religious groups go, I personally avoid all of them. I was actually labeled a Jew at some point because I had a Jewish father. The reality is that I don't practice Judaism and have really nothing to do with organized religion anymore because I found there was simply too many people that were part of hate groups. I love the life of Christ and his work, but I saw that there were too many people who simply thought the life of Christ was about sacrificing a Jewish man, and I had no interest in wanting to be a part of that. I believed in what he did as far as human rights and believing in the rights of children. Those are the most important things. So this has been another edition of Simply Stated. I'm going to go ahead and actually note just for you that the DIA actually does want all of these people put away. I think we're really at the point where we're going to have to get help from the English in Australia as far as getting J.Lo arrested, because she clearly enjoys the fights and weird stuff she's doing in public with Ben Affleck, who is pretty clearly getting a divorce from her or maybe even never had a legal marriage from her, so he can simply walk away at any point. But as far as her housing, obviously, you know, as I've stated before, she was squatting in that house out in LA and she's being thrown out of it. So she's having to find other housing. So whenever you see her, try to remember that this isn't just about her making bad material. And anyone who tries to claim she ever did anything good simply doesn't understand the reality of the photoshopping, the voice is stolen, the other people who've been forced to work for her for free and stand in abused, raped, tortured, that she was responsible for me being brutally raped and tortured back in 2019. And that she helped plan the attack on the US Capitol. So she's actually somebody who also has to be arrested for what happened to the US Capitol. Don't forget it. I have no idea who's going to end up becoming president. I think it's very interesting, but there's a significant chance the current president will actually end up withdrawing from the election race, and Trump's definitely not going to be voted in as president either. So that's kind of where we stand today. I've got one more item for you, which is that I'm actually going to sing for you this morning, and I'm going to sing the national anthem. But I'm only going to do the first verse, okay? Just the first verse. Just remember, the point about some of this is that we got a few too many jerks in lying in the media, and that the media outlets are controlled by the Russian mafia and the old KGB and the Chinese CCP. Remembering that the KGB is not called the FSB of Russia, and that J.Lo is actually a military leader who's been allowed to live for too long in the U.S. Even if she lives here most of the time, I have no idea. She probably lives in Moscow most of the time, but never know. She could be hiding out right here in Michigan for all we know. So here we go with the Star Spangled Banner. At least the first verse. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed by the twilight's last gleaming, whose bright stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombers stinging in air, ye proved through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave? Oh, land of the free and the home of the brave. And that was an edition of Simply Stated.